Our speaker today.
Hello, my name is Tim, and I'm an addict.
Hi, Tim.
And I don't know why, but I'm nervous. I'm not usually nervous, but I heard the planning committee for the Napa Solano co-ed campout starting, and that just got me. I am gonna cry, so let's just deal with that. Call your sponsor. Last year at the campout, none of my friends from Cocoa ended up coming, so I was adopted by a whole bunch of people there, the LGBT contingent, and I was welcomed into their little family, and it was just amazing. I like to use the term family when it refers to NA because, for one, it is a family to me, but also my family is so freaking dysfunctional and scattered. Many of them are dead, so I don't really have much of a family. So I've made my own family here. I have 8 months and 18 days today. I once had a lot more time than that, and I'll get into that later, but I went back out. I came back in, wasn't taking meds, and I was super manic, and I went back out again, and here I am again. But I just wanted to say, I noticed Josh, I'm going to call you out because that's what I do. You have a court card up here. Those court cards saved my life, whoever you are. I was living in an SLE, and they required me to go to meetings, but they also did something I've never seen another SLE do, and that's to call five addicts a day. And that saved my life because when I came back, I was angry. I was angry. I was angry at myself, mostly, but I was also angry because I would go to meetings and I'd see people. They're all happy. They're all cliquey. They're all in their own little worlds, just enjoying their recovery. And I didn't get the red carpet welcome that I expected. Don't you know Tim's back?
Yeah.
Where's my parade? Where's the fanfare? And I had to learn the hard way that a lot of people, when we go out and we come back, we hurt people. We hurt ourselves, but we also hurt people because there are a lot of people who love us. And they get close to us, and suddenly we're gone. And I had to realize that. A lot of people kept me at arm's length. So someone pulled me aside. I shared at a meeting. I was pissed. I just let it out. I was like, and then someone pulled me aside and said, Tim, and he didn't say it like this because he's a very loving guy. He's like, why don't you just pull your head out of your ass and start calling people? Reach out to them. Stop being so self-centered. And I did that. And because I also had to do it for the SLE, I just started calling people, asking them how they were doing. And eventually I started making friends. Real friends. And when it wasn't about me anymore, I got out of my own way, and that was very meaningful to me. There's a line in Relapse and Recovery that I just love. And it's very pertinent to me. After a member has some time, has some involvement in the fellowship, a relapse may be the jarring experience that brings about a more rigorous application of the steps of the program. I think that's what's happening. I had 12 and a half years once. And during that time, I had a lot of recoveries. Air quotes, recovery. I was going to a lot of meetings. I was doing a lot of service. But I feel like for me, and this is just for me, I can go to a lot of meetings. I could do a lot of service. I could do all the things, but just go through the motion. Service was about the look good. Service was about me being Captain NA, doing everything I can. But in the meantime, even with roughly 7 months clean, a year's clean, I was an emotionally, spiritually, and sometimes physically abusive husband. I was a horrible employee. I mean, I could get jobs, but I couldn't keep them. And I was basically just a baby. If things didn't go the way I wanted them to, I threw tantrums. And a lot of that is me and a lack of recovery. Some of that is, I'm dually diagnosed, so I have bipolar, I have OCD, I have a lot of PTSD. And that, I may or may not be on the autism spectrum. So I could blame all that, or I could just do the work. And that's what I've been doing. I've been noticing lately, I don't know how many times I've been through the steps, how many times I've read the steps. But in the first step, there are two words that are past tense. We were powerless, and our lives had become unmanageable. I don't have to be powerless anymore. There are a lot of things in my life over which I am powerless, but there are a lot of things I can choose to have power over. I can choose the people who are going to be in my life. I can choose the people I open up to. I can choose the people I trust. And I can choose, if my life's becoming unmanageable, to simply do something different. And that's hard. And it's easier said than done. Like right now in my life, I have some physical things going on. I have some stuff going on with my brain that's scary. And I can choose to look at the negative, or I could choose to keep pushing on. Know that I have a lot of doctors who are helping me. I have a lot of support from friends and family. And I can stay on the positive. But I'm not powerless over that. And there's a lot of things I can do. Right now I'm in the middle of a 7th step. And anyone who's afraid of their 4th step, get over that. Work through it, because the 6th step is the one that's going to kick your ass. That's my experience. And again, if you don't like that, talk to your sponsor. Assuming you have one. Where I am today in my life, and I'll qualify eventually. I don't like to do that, but I'm living with someone who is a lot like me. He has a lot of mental health disorders. I don't feel his is being treated. He's a very controlling person. So I'd heard somewhere, there was a Just for Today about it a couple weeks ago. Basically, if there's something about someone we don't like, it's generally something we don't like about ourselves. And there's a lot about this person I don't like, but there's a lot about this person that I absolutely love. And it's kind of the same thing with me. There's just a lot of me that I hate, but I'm trying to get over that. Working the steps is helping me. My 2nd and 3rd step, in the past, I've always just glazed over those steps. The higher power thing, yeah, sure, I got that. I can pray to something, blah, 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 blah. But I'm developing a relationship with a higher power today that I've never done before. And I pray throughout the day a lot. I named my higher power. Gwenny for 2 reasons. One, my favorite play is Camelot, and Guinevere is just a great character in that play. But also because I'm Buddhist, and there's a Buddhist figure called the Guanyin. It just reminds me of that. And for me, saying God is okay if that works for you. Saying HP is good. But for me, it's just more personal to give my higher power a name. It could just have a relation, a conversation with her. And this is the cool thing about Narcotics Anonymous is that, I choose to have a higher power today. You don't have to. There are people who come in who are agnostic, who are atheists, and that's fine. I know people who have double-digit clean time, whose recovery I very much respect, who simply doesn't have a higher power. We have that choice today. So don't ever feel like you're forced into having a higher power of any sort. And if you choose to, you can make that higher power whatever you want. As long as it's loving and caring and greater than you, that's all it is. And the other thing is that it's not you. I tried to be my own higher power before, and that doesn't work. It really doesn't work. So anyway, growing up on the outside of my family, you'd think everything was fine. My dad co-founded a bank, so we never hurt for money. We had everything we needed. He worked a lot, so he wasn't home very often. My mom was a school teacher, so you'd think, again, on the outside that looks fine. I'm the youngest of three. My brother, he lives out here with me. My sister lives back on the East Coast in Virginia. On the inside of the house, though, there were a lot of things going on. So both my parents were addicts. My dad was an alcoholic. My mom was an alcoholic. My dad died with roughly 10 years sober. My mom never got sober. She drank herself to death. But there was a lot going on there as well. Growing up, there was a lot of molestation. There was just a lot of neglect. And so somewhere around 9, things got really dark for me, and I started, I had my first suicide attempts, but also somewhere around there, I stole a tin of secrets. Those cough drop things, and I loved them because they numbed my mouth. It's like the first thing I found, like, ooh, okay, I like that. Let's find more of that. And one of my neighbors, the friends in my neighborhood, his dad owned a bar, so he always had a whole box of those little miniatures, those little sample things, or whatever, the things you get in hotels or airplanes. So, we started drinking those, and eventually in high school, someone had some good old-fashioned Maryland dirtweed, and that ended up being my drug of choice. And I didn't realize what I was doing. But I was looking for things to change the way I felt. I heard someone say that once at a meeting. My addiction is not to any specific drug or food or sex or anything like that. It's simply my addiction is simply to changing the way I feel when I don't feel comfortable. And drugs just happen to be the most efficient way to do that. There were a lot of things I didn't do until I relapsed. I had never used some of the more quote-unquote hardcore drugs. But, at 12 and a half years, I relapsed, and I did a lot of my yets, a lot of things I had never done yet. I started doing meth, and first I liked that because it focused me. I'm ADHD. It helped me sleep. And then, eventually I ended up homeless. I didn't think that would ever happen. So the unmanageability in my life was apparent. That I could see. The powerlessness, that was harder for me because I never quite understood the difference between my will and God's will. And when I first moved to California, I had about 3 years clean at the time. I picked a sponsor named Jeffrey R. that no one liked. No one wanted them to be their sponsor. And that's one of the reasons I chose him. Because I figured if no one liked him, he's probably a good sponsor and he'll tell me the truth. And that was the case. Before I started working any steps with him, he made me read every single piece of any literature in print. Every IP, every book, even the PR and H&I handbooks. It was PI at the time, but whatever. But he told me, very simply, my will is painful, God's will is not. So if at any point in my life I feel like I'm beating my head against the wall, I'm most likely in my will, not in Gwenny's. So I had 12 and a half years, but I guess when I had roughly 10, I was doing a buttload of service. I was GSR a couple meetings, not a couple, but I was doing PR service and I was doing regional service, and I got angry. Yeah, I saw that it was basically musical chairs, the same same people, just rotating around, and I get frustrated when I see that only 15% of the people that come to meetings do service beyond meeting level. And I'll try not to get on a high horse about that. It's easy for me to do that, but I eventually stopped. I pulled away from meetings, and I was dating someone at the time, and she had moved down to Southern California to go to a mental health facility that she needed to be in. Eventually, she asked me to move down there, and like a good codependent, I did. I left my whole family up here, despite everyone's objection for me not to do that. I uprooted my life, and I tried to get plugged in to the meetings down there, but again, no red carpet welcome, so fuck you guys. And a lot of not so great things happened in that relationship. Eventually, I was on a plane coming from SoCal back up here, and the drink cart went by, and I just said, why not? I didn't have my tools. I didn't have my meetings. I didn't have all the things I have now. I didn't have any of that. And in that moment, I was weak. I proceeded to drink normally for about a year, and then eventually someone left me alone. He and his wife went to China for 3 months, and I was house sitting, and someone left me with a whole bunch of my drug of choice, and it was on. And I was out for about three years, and eventually I came back. But like I said, I wasn't medicated. I was super manic, and after a year, I relapsed again, and things just got worse and worse and worse. And I saw on Facebook all these people, so bright and shiny, so happy. 'Cause, I have 1,000,001 friends on Facebook from recovery, and I was getting resentful. But there was one person. You may know her as the Free Hug Girl. All of her posts, they were bright and shiny and happy and all of that, but there was something about them, and I told her this, but she was the one that brought me back. She kind of saved my life. So eventually, I was living in an SLE down in San Mateo, and they either didn't know or didn't care, but I was using the whole time while I was there. My brother said, Tim, all of your family is here in Contra Costa. Why don't you just move back? It's a pain in the ass for me to come see you. I said, okay, cool. So as soon as I got back, the first thing I did, there's an AA clubhouse near where I was living. I went there. The meeting had just went out, and the guy was kind of rude to me. So the next day, I went to a nooner. Margaret shared at nooner, and I found my home again. Pretty much every day I was going to meetings. Got to the point where in a matter of 3 months, I had gone to 299 meetings. I was going to 3-4 meetings a day because I didn't have a job, and I was working steps like a madman. My current sponsor, he's a great person. He's my best friend. I've been waffling back and forth whether or not I was going to get another sponsor, but that's my own stuff. I have a tendency when my life isn't going the way I want it to be to just try to change something, get something new. So I just finished another 4th step. My steps this round have basically been centered around relationships. Relationships have always been my Achilles heel. Like I mentioned, I'm very codependent. And my relationships have either been me being extremely codependent on my partner, or me being incredibly controlling of my partner. Either way, I've been hurt, and I've hurt other people. And I heard someone share this at a meeting. We hurt people with the best of intentions. And it sounds like a cop-out, but it's kind of true. I never intended to hurt anyone, but I did. And I hurt myself most of all. In my fourth step, I got to see that. And it was very painful to look at. But I eventually shared that with my sponsor. And because he's a goofball, at the end of it, he was like, that's it. I was expecting more, but whatever. I had worked my steps a lot of times, so a lot of it I cleaned out. But I had written an amends letter to my ex-wife. I was married for 9 months. And I had, there was I worked that particular step out of order. I don't recommend that, but it was something I had to do, and I included it as basically part of my fourth step because it was necessary. And after I shared my fourth step with my sponsor, and we went over the fifth step. It was time to start looking at my character defects, which I'm good at. I cheated a little bit. I looked. There's a website out there. I forget what it's called, but they have a whole list of common defects for addicts. I just wrote them all down, except for the ones I didn't feel applied to me. And so there's one of the questions is how do you define it? I asked the Free Hug Girl, and she's like, yeah, just do a dictionary definition for that. There's another one, how is it in your life? And then that's my own personal definition of all of that. And then there's another question for each freaking defect. How does it affect you, and how does the other person? And I have a lot of defects. I'm sorry to say, I'm not perfect. That took a long time. My sponsor kept asking me, have you stalled on your fourth step? And eventually I kind of emerged out of my little step working hole with this small novel. And he was like, oh, crap. But the hardest part about my sixth step was my assets. Like I said, I'm great at looking at the negative crap about me. That's my happy place. I'm good at that. But trying to recognize the things that I'm good at, the things that, that's the hard part for me. That's the one that ripped me in half. But I've come to find out that I have a lot of assets. Whether I like to admit that or not, I do. There's a lot of very good things about me. I want to get back to service because it's meaningful to me. And one of my favorite parts here in Living Clean, it's on page 242. It says the desire to be of service changes our relationship to the world. Now, not just in NA, it is not just in NA that we are loving and giving. We connect to that love that surrounds us by practicing loving actions and being open to receiving the same. Being willing to accept help is a form of giving. I'm going to read that again. Being willing to accept help is a form of giving. It can be uncomfortable to admit we need help or ask for help. When we allow another person to step up and help us, we are giving them a chance to express their own love and generosity. That's just beautiful. There are a lot of things I simply can't do. And there's a meeting in our area, it's the Ask It Basket, and a question that came up is, how do you deal with someone who is either in or near active relapse? And there was a lot of tough love kind of questions, no answers. And one that kept coming up is, as long as you're willing to do the footwork, as long as you're willing to do the steps, do all the stuff that you should be doing, people in AA will go to any lengths to help you. Someone actually gave me a car once. People have given me places to live. People have been, have bought me countless meals, an unheard of amount of cigarettes. Giving me rides to meetings. And when I still had that car, I tried to return the favor. I gave people rides. When I can, I give cigarettes. The love and the fellowship of this fellowship is overwhelming. Another thing I want to touch on is hugs. there are a lot of great huggers in NA, but there's a lot of people who don't know how to hug, and that's a sad thing. I'm actually considering next year in one of the Unity Day to have a hugging booth to teach people how to hug. The whole ass out pat thing, it's just not acceptable. It really isn't. And sometimes I try to gauge it and just pull people in. But no, you got to be heart to heart and feel it. Because, oh my God, that's where it is right there, man. I go to a lot of meetings because for one, I'm neurotic and I like to do that. I like to get to meetings a half hour early because I enjoy the meeting before the meeting. I like getting to know people. I like, meeting people I haven't met. I like getting to know the newcomers. Rachel, you're the most important person in this room. You're giving us the opportunity to help you. And whatever it is you might be going through, you're not alone. It's kind of the other thing NA stands for, is never alone. If we haven't already passed one around, we can pass around the phone list for you, so you have numbers of women here. They suggest men with men, women with women, and that's meaningful. For someone like me who's kind of pansexual, that gets confusing. But men, I need the male energy. Around women, sometimes I can be a little weird. And that crosses boundaries. I don't know, I'm kind of running out of things to say. Sponsorship. If you don't have a sponsor, get one. The relationship I have with my sponsor, technically speaking, all a sponsor is supposed to do is guide you through the steps, period, end of sentence. However, if you allow that relationship to grow, if you're honest with your sponsor, you can build one of the greatest friendships you'll ever have. But it also says in the sponsorship IP that a sponsor is not a taxi, a sponsor is not an ATM, a sponsor is not, someone who's just going to be your biggest codependent and solve all your problems. No. Primarily speaking, your sponsor is supposed to guide you through the steps, either through the flat book or right here. You can work the steps right here. This is the program of Narcotics Anonymous. These are great supplemental books, and they can get you there. Your step working guide is awesome. I've worked it a lot. But I also feel that the step working guide makes it very easy for people to sponsor themselves. Been there, done that. I don't suggest it. Anyway, I'm starting to ramble. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and share with you guys.
Yeah.